Hi, my name's Phil and welcome to LabourVision, where we discuss Labour policies. And this week, the Brexiteers have been melting down at the prospect of a Labour government potentially being able to reduce the trade barriers which have been crushing many British businesses, causing less choice and higher prices for consumers and holding back our economy. So what do Labour want and what do reports say may be possible? But first, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Labour Party commentary. So Brexit, bit of a problem. The extreme Tory Brexit landed us in a situation which is not easily or quickly reversed. We're now outside the single market and customs union and so face full third country bureaucracy, costs, restrictions when trying to export to our most important market. We have not, as Brexiteers promised, benefited from enhanced trade around the world either. Whenever they point out, oh, but some of these businesses are now increasing their exports to these other markets, it's not been a benefit. It's because it costs them more to do so. They have had to take a hit to profits simply because it is now harder to export to France than it is to Indonesia for some things. This hit to profits is part of the reason you're paying a record tax rate for modern times. And it is why when you look at actual change volumes of exports, they're still down. We've got lower profits, which means lower taxes being paid by businesses, which means the overall tax rate goes up to compensate. So what can Labour do about it in the short term? Well, there are actually quite a few things that Labour are going to do and going to try to do, because some of them require, of course, cooperation with the EU. But top of the list is negotiating with the EU to lower trade barriers in a mutually agreeable way. Our trade and cooperation agreement is up for review in 2026. Now, Brexiteers and some more cynical rejoiners have spent some time pointing out that the EU have said they don't want to make changes. They just want to tweak it here or there where something's clearly not working. And I have said at the time, look, this is a starting position for negotiations. Of course it is. Labour wants an extensive reworking of the entire agreement. Again, this is going to be their starting position for negotiations. The reality, as with all negotiations, is likely to end up between the two starting positions. That being said, there is also an extra impetus which the EU would not have foreseen when agreeing the original deal with Boris Johnson. Russia is invading Europe, the US may not be a reliable ally, and a Trump presidency would not just bring a security nightmare for our entire continent, but an economic one as well. If the US stops being an ally of Europe, then Europe cannot afford divisions to remain. And if we have a government who never wanted those divisions in the first place, there should be immense political will on both sides to fix a lot of the problems. It's also worth bearing in mind that Keir Starmer will be agreeing terms with a very different EU Commission. The Brexit press will not be able to keep painting Ursula von der Leyen as a sort of bogey woman for much longer because EU elections are taking place this year. That will mean the election of a new Commission President shortly afterwards. A change of personnel in both Brussels and London means that any personal grievances with the personalities who have been involved so far can just be swept away. In the last week, there have been reports of EU officials privately saying that if Labour win the election, they expect to agree some significant changes. Now, of course, none of this means a reversal of Brexit, of course. We don't even meet the requirements to join the EU now, much less have the political capital to push for it. And if we don't join the customs union, then of course we're still going to have to deal with customs controls. If we don't join the single market, we'll still have to deal with standards controls. But the friction caused by these controls is in part a consequence of divergence between the two markets. The more different the two markets are, the more trade friction there is between them. This is why all trade agreements, even free trade agreements, which are actually the weakest of all trade deals despite the fancy sounding name, they work on the basis of harmonising markets to an extent, converging. It's the only way to reduce friction. You won't get rid of the friction altogether unless you are part of the same market, but you can narrow it down as long as you move your markets close together. Labour have said that they will not dynamically align with EU standards, which means we're not going to automatically adopt all EU standards whenever they raise theirs above the level of our own, but that we will align standards where it's in our interest. Now, what does that mean? It means you can take that to mean that where a divergence of standards is harming trade with the EU, we will align. Remember, for the sovereignty hogs, this does not have to mean adopting EU rules. It just means making sure that our standards are at least the equivalent of EU standards for any aspects of trade which are important to us. Obviously, if there are goods or services that we don't really export to the EU much, there will be less need to mess about with standards on those areas, right? So what are the areas where Labour want to focus and where reports suggest the EU might be agreeable? Because we have to remember, it doesn't matter what either the EU want or the Labour government want. What matters is where's the crossover on the Venn diagram between both of their priorities, because that's where your mutual agreements come in. And according to the newspaper, car manufacture, food and plant products and financial services have all been mentioned as areas of fruitful negotiation. And no matter when the election takes place, Labour will have had at least a year to properly sound out the EU, including this new EU Commission, about proposals before the negotiations formally begin, meaning that time could be saved when that process kicks off. So there we are, some real hope that within a few years we may be in a much better place and can then start to turn around our economic performance. It will be long, it'll be quite grueling, I suspect, but as the Chinese say, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and please give the video a like and subscribe for further content, and until next time, I'll see you later.